Before he became the legendary Iron Man, Tony Stark was known for something completely different. He was the brilliant billionaire behind the world's most advanced and dangerous weapons. Born to the legendary inventor Howard Stark, Tony displayed extraordinary intelligence from an incredibly young age. At just 4 years old, he built his first circuit board. By the age of 6, he had assembled a working V8 engine, and at only 17, he graduated from MIT with top honors. It was clear that Tony wasn't just gifted, he was a once-in-a-generation genius. After the death of his father, Tony inherited Stark Industries and transformed it into the world's leading weapons manufacturer. The company supplied cutting-edge military technology across the globe, making Tony one of the richest and most influential men on Earth. But behind the glamorous image of success, Tony lived the carefree lifestyle of a playboy. He spent his days partying, drinking, racing expensive sports cars, and waking up beside a different woman almost every morning. Fortunately, his loyal assistant Pepper was always there to clean up the mess, handling both his business affairs and personal disasters with remarkable patience. One day, Tony was scheduled to fly to Afghanistan to demonstrate Stark Industries' newest military weapon. However, instead of preparing for the trip, he spent the morning working on one of his favorite sports cars. By the time he finally arrived at the airport, he was already 3 hours late. After landing in Afghanistan, Tony confidently presented his latest missile system to the US military. The demonstration was a huge success, leaving the military leaders thoroughly impressed with the incredible destructive power of Stark Industries' newest weapon. Tony believed it was another triumph for his company, unaware that this very invention was about to change his life forever. As Tony's convoy traveled back through the desert, everything suddenly descended into chaos. Armed terrorists launched a brutal ambush, destroying the military vehicles within seconds. Bullets flew from every direction as explosions ripped across the desert. Nearly every soldier escorting Tony was killed instantly. Desperate to survive, Tony ran behind a massive rock and reached for his phone to call for help. But before he could do anything, he noticed something horrifying. A Stark Industries missile had landed only a few feet away from him. Before he could react, the missile exploded, throwing him into darkness. When Tony finally opened his eyes again, he found himself trapped inside a dark cave. The first thing he noticed was the strange metal device attached to his chest. Standing beside him was a scientist named Yinsen, another prisoner captured by the terrorists. Yinsen explained that pieces of shrapnel from the missile explosion had lodged dangerously close to Tony's heart. To keep those deadly fragments from reaching it, he had built a crude electromagnet powered by a battery and attached it directly to Tony's chest. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was enough to keep him alive. Not long afterward, several terrorists entered the cave carrying blueprints for Stark missiles. They demanded that Tony build the weapons for them. Refusing immediately, Tony was brutally beaten until he could barely stand. Realizing he had no choice if he wanted to survive, he pretended to cooperate. Secretly, however, he had already begun planning an escape. Instead of building missiles, Tony started extracting palladium from the weapons surrounding him. His first goal was to create a miniature arc reactor powerful enough to replace the bulky electromagnet keeping him alive. Once the arc reactor was complete, he and Yinsen secretly began constructing something even more ambitious, a fully armored suit capable of helping them escape. Over the following days, the two men carefully assembled the armor piece by piece, while pretending to work on the missiles. Every plate of steel, every mechanical component, and every wire brought Tony one step closer to freedom. During one of the testing sessions, however, the terrorists noticed suspicious activity inside the cave and rushed in to investigate. Thinking quickly, Yinsen claimed that the strange metal parts were simply components of the missiles they had requested. The terrorists didn't believe him and prepared to execute Yinsen on the spot. Without hesitation, Tony stepped forward and warned them that if Yinsen died, no missiles would ever be finished. The gang leader reluctantly backed down but gave Tony a terrifying ultimatum. If the missiles weren't completed by the following day, both men would be killed. Knowing time was running out, Tony worked tirelessly throughout the entire night. He hammered metal, welded armor plates together, and assembled the final components without stopping. By sunrise, the impossible had become reality. The first Iron Man Armor Mark I was finally complete. Meanwhile, the terrorists noticed that there had been no movement inside the cave on their surveillance cameras. Growing suspicious, the gang leader sent 2 armed men inside to investigate. Tony had anticipated exactly this. He had rigged the entrance with explosives, and the moment they opened the door, the bomb detonated, blasting both men backward. Realizing something had gone terribly wrong, the gang leader ordered all of his men to attack. Unfortunately, the armor still needed time to complete its startup sequence. Someone had to buy Tony those final precious seconds. Without hesitation, Yinsen grabbed a rifle and charged outside. Interestingly, although he carried a gun, he never intentionally tried to kill anyone. Instead, he fired warning shots around the terrorists, hoping only to distract them and buy Tony enough time to escape. Even surrounded by violence, Yinsen refused to abandon his compassion. His courage and kindness would leave a permanent mark on Tony, inspiring him to become a hero who protected lives instead of taking them. At last, the armor powered on. For the very first time, Iron Man stepped into battle. Wrapped inside the massive Mark I suit, Tony became nearly unstoppable. Bullets bounced harmlessly off the thick steel armor, while enemy defenses crumbled before him. Terrified terrorists fled in every direction as Tony tore through the camp. However, the crude prototype wasn't perfect. During the battle, his left arm became stuck inside the suit for a brief moment, a small flaw that quietly foreshadowed injuries he would suffer years later. As Tony fought his way through the camp, he discovered that Yinsen had been mortally wounded while buying him time. Heartbroken by the sacrifice of the man who had saved his life, Tony unleashed the full power of the Mark I armor. He destroyed every terrorist who stood in his way, blew up their stockpile of stolen Stark weapons, and reduced the entire camp to flames. Finally, using the suit's primitive rocket boosters, Tony blasted into the sky. Unfortunately, the armor wasn't designed for long-distance flight. Moments later, it ran out of fuel, sending Tony crashing violently into the desert below. The armor shattered into pieces on impact, but remarkably, Tony survived. Not long afterward, his closest friend, Rhodey, arrived with a rescue team and brought him safely home. The experience had changed Tony forever. For the first time in his life, he realized that the weapons he had spent years creating weren't protecting innocent people. Instead, they were fueling wars, destroying lives, and falling into the hands of dangerous criminals. That painful realization became the turning point of his life. From that moment on, Tony Stark stopped seeing himself as a weapons manufacturer and began the long journey toward becoming the hero the world would one day know as Iron Man. After returning home from Afghanistan, Tony Stark was no longer the same man. The billionaire weapons genius had witnessed firsthand the destruction caused by his own inventions, and he refused to let it continue. During a highly anticipated press conference, Tony shocked the entire world by announcing that Stark Industries would immediately shut down its weapons manufacturing division. The declaration sent shockwaves through the media, the military, and the financial world. No one was more furious than Obadiah Stane, Tony's longtime mentor and the company's largest shareholder. Believing Tony had lost his mind, Obadiah demanded that he reconsider such a reckless decision. But for the first time in his life, Tony was absolutely certain of his choice. His days of building weapons were over. Determined to move forward, Tony built a brand new arc reactor to replace the crude device that had been keeping him alive. When Pepper helped him perform the delicate replacement, she asked what should be done with the old reactor. Tony casually told her to throw it away because he no longer needed it. Instead, Pepper quietly kept it, placing it inside a glass display engraved with the words, "Proof that Tony Stark has a heart." At the time, neither of them realized that this small act of kindness would one day save Tony's life. Now fully committed to a new purpose, Tony locked himself inside his workshop and poured every ounce of his genius into creating a new generation of armored suits. The development process was anything but smooth. Countless experiments ended in explosions, crashes, and embarrassing failures as Tony tested new flight systems, weapons, and stabilization technology. But after endless trial and error, every component finally worked together perfectly. Piece by piece, the sleek Mark II armor came to life, marking the true birth of Iron Man. The moment of truth finally arrived. Wearing the completed armor, Tony blasted into the sky for his very first official flight. Excited like a child discovering a new toy, he pushed the suit higher and higher until he reached nearly 40,000 feet. Suddenly, disaster struck. The freezing temperatures at that altitude caused the armor to ice over, locking up its systems and sending Tony plummeting toward the ground. With only seconds to spare, he activated the suit's emergency de-icing protocol, restoring control just in time to pull out of the deadly dive. Instead of being terrified, Tony burst into laughter. For him, the successful flight of the armor represented the happiest achievement of his entire life. Over the following weeks, Tony continued improving every aspect of the suit. He reinforced the armor with stronger materials that could survive extreme temperatures and redesigned its appearance with the iconic red and gold color scheme that would soon become legendary. Meanwhile, Thousands of miles away in Afghanistan, the wreckage of the original Mark I armor was discovered by the terrorists. Fascinated by its technology, they recovered every remaining piece, hoping to unlock its secrets. One evening, while attending a high-profile charity event, Tony received disturbing information from a journalist friend. Someone was secretly supplying Stark Industries weapons directly to terrorist organizations. The revelation hit him like a punch to the stomach. Realizing there had to be a traitor inside his own company, Tony immediately confronted Obadiah Stane. Instead of denying the accusations, Obadiah calmly admitted everything. He claimed every decision he made had been to protect Stark Industries and even Tony himself. But Tony now understood the horrifying truth: his trusted mentor had been manipulating everything from the very beginning. Back at home, Tony watched footage showing innocent civilians being terrorized by the same weapons his company had built. The images filled him with guilt and anger. Unable to stand by any longer, he suited up as Iron Man and flew toward Afghanistan, determined to stop the violence himself. For Marvel fans, this moment remains unforgettable. As Tony stepped into the completed Iron Man armor and launched into the sky, a true superhero was finally born. When Iron Man arrived in the village, the terrorists were once again brutalizing innocent civilians. Tony wasted no time. Descending from the clouds like a mechanical guardian, he effortlessly dismantled the terrorists one by one. Using the suit's advanced targeting system, he eliminated armed enemies with incredible precision, while carefully avoiding innocent hostages. Even a terrorist hiding safely behind a thick wall couldn't escape, as Tony used the suit's technology to expose and disarm him before handing him over to the grateful villagers. Before leaving, Tony fired a powerful missile that destroyed the terrorists' entire stockpile of stolen Stark weapons, ensuring they could never be used again. However, Tony's mission wasn't over yet. As he flew home, U.S. military radar detected an unidentified armored object entering restricted airspace. Mistaking Iron Man for a hostile aircraft, fighter jets were immediately scrambled to intercept him. A dangerous aerial pursuit followed until Tony managed to contact his best friend, Rhodey, explaining the unbelievable truth. Thanks to Rhodey's quick intervention, the military called off the attack, allowing Tony to return home safely. Meanwhile, Obadiah traveled to the terrorist camp in Afghanistan. It was finally revealed that he had been the mastermind behind Tony's kidnapping all along. His goal had always been to seize control of Stark Industries for himself. The terrorists proudly presented the recovered Mark I armor, hoping Obadiah would help them mass-produce similar suits. But they had outlived their usefulness. Without hesitation, Obadiah betrayed them, slaughtering every terrorist in the camp and taking the armor for himself. Back in America, Tony asked Pepper to secretly investigate the company's internal records. Sneaking into Stark Industries, she copied classified files onto a USB drive and uncovered overwhelming evidence exposing Obadiah's crimes. Unfortunately, just as she finished, Obadiah unexpectedly entered the office. Staying remarkably calm, Pepper hid the flash drive and walked out as naturally as possible. Moments later, Obadiah discovered that confidential data had been stolen and rushed after her. Before he could act, however, Agent Phil Coulson unexpectedly arrived. Since Tony had repeatedly ignored Coulson's requests to meet, the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent happened to be at Stark Industries looking for him. His sudden appearance forced Obadiah to back off, allowing Pepper to escape safely. Realizing his secrets were exposed, Obadiah ordered his scientists to complete a massive arc reactor capable of powering his own armored suit. Despite their best efforts, they admitted they couldn't duplicate Tony's genius. Frustrated, one scientist even remarked that if they possessed Tony Stark's intelligence, the company wouldn't be called Stark Industries. It would belong to them instead. Left with no other option, Obadiah decided to steal what he needed. Using advanced sonic technology, Obadiah temporarily paralyzed Tony inside his own home before brutally ripping the arc reactor directly out of his chest. As Tony collapsed, unable to breathe, it seemed certain he would die. But in his darkest moment, Pepper rushed to him with the old arc reactor she had secretly kept. The forgotten device became Tony's lifeline once again, saving him from certain death. With Tony's reactor installed, Obadiah powered up his gigantic armored suit, transforming himself into the terrifying Iron Monger. At the same time, Pepper returned with several S.H.I.E.L.D. agents to arrest him. Unfortunately, they were far too late. The newly armored Iron Monger easily crushed the agents and escaped the laboratory. Pepper barely managed to flee before calling Tony for help. Tony quickly suited up and confronted Obadiah, but he immediately realized he was physically outmatched. Ironmonger's armor was larger, heavier, and vastly more powerful. Knowing brute force wouldn't work, Tony relied on strategy instead. He lured Monger high into the atmosphere, where the freezing temperatures caused Obadiah's armor to lock up, just as the Mark II suit had during Tony's first flight. Although Monger crashed back to Earth, he survived the impact. Tony's own armor was nearly out of power, leaving him exhausted and vulnerable. Obadiah soon recovered and brutally overpowered Tony, pinning him beneath the massive suit. Only by firing a small flare into Monger's face did Tony manage to escape. Realizing he had only one chance left, Tony contacted Pepper and instructed her to overload Stark Industries' giant arc reactor. Although she desperately feared the consequences, she knew there was no alternative. With trembling hands, Pepper activated the system. Instantly, an enormous surge of electricity shot into the sky, unleashing an explosion of energy that engulfed Monger. The massive suit collapsed directly into the reactor, where both Obadiah and his armor were completely destroyed. Tony survived the blast by only the narrowest of margins. Following the battle, the media demanded answers. At the official press conference, government officials handed Tony a carefully prepared statement that would conceal his identity and explain away the incident. All he had to do was read the script. Standing before countless reporters, Tony looked down at the paper, paused for a moment, and then threw the entire plan aside. Looking directly into the cameras, he smiled and delivered one of the most iconic lines in superhero history. "I am Iron Man." The announcement instantly stunned the world. Reporters erupted with questions, governments scrambled for answers, and powerful organizations immediately took notice. Tony Stark had done the impossible. He had publicly revealed himself as a superhero. Later that evening, Tony returned home expecting a quiet night. Instead, he found a mysterious man calmly waiting inside his living room. Introducing himself as Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Fury told Tony that he had become part of something much bigger than he could possibly imagine. With that single conversation, the foundation for Earth's mightiest heroes, the Avengers, was finally set in motion.